So, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you're joining us for the first time, and we do have some teachers joining us for the first time today, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And I'm so thrilled you guys are joining us in your first month back after a crazy 8 months of schooling. It's so nice to see kids back in classrooms, social distancing, wearing masks, staggered starts, kids at home, whatever is working for you guys. We're thrilled that you're spending some of that time with us. So today's been an absolutely crazy day. We've gone to Plastiki, a plastic ship crossing oceans. We've had a special message from Jane Goodall. We've gone to the Agui River in Gabon, and we have seen some amazing owls at the Vermont Institute of Natural Sciences. This is our 5th program of the day. We've got 2 more still to come, so it's a crazy day. And today's talk, right now's talk, is on our topic of the month. So every September, we spend the month talking about ocean plastics, microplastics, marine pollution, and more. It's one of the biggest issues of the day. It's totally apolitical. It's exciting. No one looks at a beach covered in plastic and goes, wow, how great is that? And so we always love to highlight ways that we can take charge ourselves to make the world a better place, to clean up that plastic, to prevent it from getting there in the first place. And there's no better person to talk about that than our speaker today. So joining us in Carmel, California is Daniella Russo. She is going to talk about innovative plastic pollution solutions with her organization, Think Beyond Plastic. And I'm so thrilled to have her joining us today. So without further ado, thank you so much for coming in today, Daniella, and take us away.
Thank you, Jesse, and thank you for having me. I couldn't be more excited to be joining you here today in a world that looks like nothing that it did before, certainly nothing that it did last year. And it's a fantastic opportunity to think how things that are broken could be made whole again in a different, better way. And in this particular instance, we are serving you, the ones sitting behind the desks in a classroom, a world that we successfully broke because we made it out of plastic. Plastic is toxic, as you've already seen, and very wasteful. So I'm here to share with you our view of how we can improve on all of this, how we can make it better. If you've been on the ocean with Plastiki already, you know how big the problem of plastic pollution is. And the big question is, what makes it so difficult? So I would like to say that global plastic pollution is a wicked problem. And if you haven't heard this term, it's a term from design language that is used to explain a problem that has many different solutions, but often these solutions are mutually exclusive. So people around you probably say, well, we can recycle, or we can just stop using plastic. Why can't we just stop using it and go back to where we were 70 years ago? Why can't we just do things differently? And the reality is that most of these solutions in of themselves seem to work okay unless they contradict each other, and oftentimes they're mutually exclusive. That's a wicked problem. Plastic pollution is a wicked problem. And let's look into what made it this way. It didn't start this way. Our society introduced plastic about 70 years ago, probably in the lifetime of some of your parents who still remember a world before plastic. And it came in to solve a lot of problems for us. It came in to help with packaging. It came in actually during World War II. Some of the airplanes had their doors wrapped in cellophane, which is a form of plastic that is not used so much today, but it was that kind of crinkly plastic. And it was so good that it was promoted as the new technology that was going to solve everything. You can see the little kid, wrapped up in cellophane, delivered as a gift to his parents. Everything at its best in cellophane. Years went by, and plastic became a big promise for society that was going to help everybody save time. So imagine you serve a whole family dinner, then you pack everything and throw it away, right? It sounded like a great idea at the time. It saved time. Women at that time often were in charge of taking care of the family and often trying to work at the same time. So garbage was a better alternative than washing dishes. Sounds crazy, but that's how it was promoted at the time. And useful even today. Some uses of plastic, very good uses of plastic, are like this little baby in a neonatal room who was born before his term. He's wrapped up in plastic to keep his body temperature high and to keep him warm. Other uses are essential uses in areas like agriculture. If you live near an agricultural region, please next time you're in the car driving around, pay attention to the fields. Right now, they're all covered in plastic. The picture on the left, that brown plastic, is actually a new technology called plastic mulching, where the fields are covered with plastic so that the vegetation that grows on top of it is protected from dirt, protected from molding in the soil, and also it's more or less store ready. Like in the case with strawberries, they would be really, really dirty if the field is not covered in plastic. But what happens with this plastic in the fields is exactly what happens to plastic in the ocean. Exposed to the sunlight, it breaks down into small, very toxic particles that enter the soil and potentially can kill the microbial life, all the worms, everything that makes the soil beneficial for growing vegetation is affected by the toxic elements in that plastic. On the right-hand side are these tunnels that you also may have seen depending on where you live, but they're used worldwide to protect delicate fruits and vegetables from the sun rays. And so as you see, there are miles and miles and miles of them, and after about a year or so, depending on how harsh the sunlights are, these tunnels break, and then they start flapping in the wind, and it becomes a really ugly sight. And the reality is that that kind of plastic has no use to anyone. So it gets collected and then it gets thrown away. And oftentimes where it gets thrown away is somewhere in the soil. So um, with all of these great uses of plastic, there were a lot of unintended consequences. And I'm promising you, I'm not going to be showing you dead birds and trashed communities, but I have to show you at least something like this, because when this product began to be used widely and for everything, it brought about a number of unintended consequences, like the polluting aspect of plastic. In communities where there is no capacity to collect it and even put it in a landfill, there were mountains or rivers of plastic that are running through them. And in the bottom of the ocean, on the bottom of the ocean, when plastic that sinks to the bottom, animals begin to turn it into their habitat, like this hermit crab that has chosen to live in a plastic bottle on the bottom of one of the most famous diving spots in the world in Honduras. Obviously, that's not a good thing, because when the animals begin to take in um, plastic artificial components of waste for their habitat, then our world begins to change in ways we cannot predict. These are images of plastic waste that is being disposed of in Honduras. Again, some of the most amazing diving spots, the Mesoamerican reef, coral reef, which is basically the only healthy coral reef in the world right now. And on the right-hand side, you see what's under the water when you dive, well, the plastic cups and all the garbage. And on the left-hand side is what people do, people who live on top of this reef, because they simply have no way of getting rid of this plastic. And you may ask, well, why do they use it? It's because all of their drinking water comes in plastic. All of their detergent, laundry detergent, oil with which they power their boats, just about every consumer product that they use comes in plastic. So they have no choice. They have no alternatives. And what we call externalities is all of these unexpected impacts of plastic, which started as a good thing and turned into a very, very, very bad thing. But I don't need to even show you pictures of this plastic pollution. Next time you go to the grocery store, look around and you will see everything packaged in plastic. All of this is plastic pollution. And there is plastic pollution in the grocery stores, there is plastic pollution in the ocean, there is plastic pollution in the air, because this incineration here, that when the plastic is burned and you can smell it, you can smell the burning plastic, that becomes toxic particulate matter that floats into the air. It doesn't just go away, it's not visible to the eye, but these are small particles that are in the air. So there is plastic pollution just about everywhere. And it all happened because plastic is a material that has inherent design flaws. It's like this bicycle looks pretty and elegant, but really cannot ride. Plastic is a material that should not be used to package food and beverage because plastic leaches toxic chemicals into the food and beverage it contains. To make plastic, to make a plastic bottle or a plastic container of any kind, you start with a material that's essentially inert and you add chemicals to it, and these chemicals are what gives it its properties. These chemicals are also endocrine disruptors, and endocrine disruptors are basically the hormones that are in your body. In normal quantities, that's a good thing. In excessive quantities, it's a very, very bad thing. So it leads to all sorts of health issues, including autism, infertility, and so on and so forth. And we're using it in really, really, really big quantities. But the other issue, the other design flaw is that we're using this material to create single-use items and items specifically intended to go away. Yet every bit of plastic ever made is still with us on this planet. Plastic does not go away. So you're making, industry is making this packaging intended to be thrown away or for single use out of a material that never goes away. And on top of everything, it has been hundreds, millions of years in the making. I mean, we're talking back to the time of the dinosaurs. So these are design flaws that now are becoming obvious to us after 70 years of use. And the reality is most everything that's on the bottom of the ocean has been created in the last 35 years of use of plastic. So when you have a problem on this magnitude and on this scale, and the problem is caused by the material that is both very, very useful and very, very bad for certain applications, the question is, how do you deal with this? And this is why we said it's a wicked problem. So the way to solve a wicked problem is not by an individual behavior change. It's not by one ban of plastic bags. It's not by one change. It's by mobilizing massive resources, and we refer to it as a moonshot innovation. As you undoubtedly know, this term came from the time when our country sent people on the moon. And it was an effort that's never been done before. It required massive collaboration by everyone, by civil society, scientists, government, investors. Practically everybody was part of this mobilization effort. And it's an inspiring effort because it has incredible impact on humanity, but it also requires a lot of collaboration on an unprecedented scale. So our organization is working on mobilizing this effort, and primarily in three areas. One is to create a new generation of materials that we call biobenign. And biobenign means a material that's sustainably derived. It's from a renewable source. It's sustainably manufactured without toxic chemicals and is able to break down in the environment. And these materials exist today, and I will show you in a minute what they are and what we can make out of them. The second thing is green chemistry. And green chemistry is essentially a new generation of chemical processes that do not create toxic residue, but also use organic sustainable elements to create alternatives to the chemicals that are used in plastics today. And last but not least, services and not products. And you may have heard references to the circular economy. It's talked a lot about today, an economy where our model is not to make a product, consume it, and then discard it, but make a product, use it, and reuse it. So products that are built for reuse. And increasingly, we're talking about not products, not buying one detergent in the store, but services. Buy a refill of your detergent as a service, not as a product that you have to worry about the packaging and bring home and then discard. So increasingly, we talk about the gig economy, services like Uber and Uber Eats, and any type of economy where services provided as opposed to somebody purchasing the entire equipment to make a product is a way of the future. It's the way we're all going to move, and moving the whole industry from how it does things today to how this will work in the future is a monumental task. That's why it's part of the Moonshot Innovation effort that we have begun. Where the innovation opportunities are, this is where we need your help, because there are innovation opportunities in changing the way plastics are used everywhere, from agriculture, as we discussed, to fashion and textile, where now alternatives to plastic are being used that don't shed, that don't have microfibers, that don't enter the ocean or the sea. From transportation, where plastic is used a lot to wrap up bricks, to wrap up, shrink wrap, and move things around, and to construction, where plastic is also used a lot. There are multiple innovation opportunities everywhere. So we've worked on a whole generation of new materials. And again, after the slides, I'll show you some real examples, but materials that biodegrade. So this bottle, for example, is made from non-traditional, non-fossil fuel-based plastic. It has a limited shelf life, and after it serves its purpose, it can degrade in the soil into biobenign elements. Oftentimes, this material can be made out of the chemicals that come out of degrading agricultural waste. And so you can create the bottle is a container that could be used for a limited amount of time and then just get rid of it. We make plastic alternatives out of microbes. Microbial fermentation process is one way of doing it. We make plastic alternatives and package alternatives out of mushrooms and mycelium. And the little cups on the top that look like styrofoam are actually made out of foam from the exoskeletons of shrimp and fish in the fishing industry output. On the right-hand side, the alternatives to these black sheets of agricultural plastic I showed you is plastic that is made out of cellulose. And it's cellulosic material that can be used in the same way that plastic is used, but obviously is biobenign and has a better quality. Here I want to show you some of the products. So if you look from the top up, on the left-hand side is a material, plastic material that biodegrades in the soil. And so it's served to take soil components and chemicals, and then you put it on top of the soil, and instead of a big ugly plastic bag, this biodegrades after some period of time. The next item next to it is biodegradable, and it's a toy. And a big issue with toys, obviously, is that the babies put them in their mouth. So it's very important that when this happens, what they suck on and what they play with, it does not have residual toxic chemical on their hands or in their mouths. And this is a biodegradable material, biobenign material that actually smells a little bit like citrus. The six-pack of soft drinks is talked about a lot. You've probably heard about it, and it kills marine life, but they do not have to be made out of plastic. And we have a company that makes this out of paper. And here in the middle is the alternative to a blister pack. A blister pack is if you go to a store, if you go to Costco, if you go to any store, you will see product wrapped up in a big plastic blister that very often is difficult to break. If you buy a toy, it comes in this blister sometimes, and it takes, a very sharp knife to cut through it. And we have a company who has redesigned that packaging so that the product is still presented properly, but it does not require this blister. The blue the ball on the right-hand side is something that I'll show you the prototype of. And it's essentially developed by a company who realized that if they put a material like this, a product like this, in a dryer machine, then the microfibers that shed out of clothing can be collected in this, and then processed and recycled instead of going into the ocean. And there are many alternatives to that. One of the big ubiquitous polluters is single-use utensils. And unfortunately, with the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a big return to single-use utensils. I would encourage you to always bring your reusable containers made out of the utensils made out of bamboo. About 1 billion of these utensils that are made of plastic are made every year and discarded, and they're extremely toxic in every way. And the lolly straw here is an edible straw. I have to show you cups that are made out of this edible material. It's made out of seaweed. And seaweed is, grows in the ocean in areas that have a huge access to labor, to relatively inexpensive labor in countries where there is a tradition of seafaring technologies and people who understand how to harvest seaweed. So we have companies in Indonesia, we have companies throughout the Philippines that collect it, process it, and make plastic alternative out of it that is actually edible. And then on the bottom where it says new services, these are several companies who experiment with dispensers. On the bottom left side, the green screen is a company we have working in Chile right now and in South America. And their product is essentially dispensing consumer products for the home, cleaning products from the home, detergents, but they also are beginning to dispense rice and pasta and dry goods, so that instead of buying this in with package, you can go to a place that dispenses it like this, bring your own container, and it's cheaper. So it's more affordable to people in lower income communities. And on the right-hand side is something that excites me tremendously because I come from high tech and I've worked on these technologies for a better part of my life, but it's essentially using refilling systems through a membership scheme where if the city is equipped with these refill stations with an RFID chip, then you can go and bring your own container and you will get water or soft drink dispensed. So my message to you is the alternatives are there, and they're not as simple as let's ban plastic bags or let's just all switch to reusable bottles. The real answer there is there are many innovation opportunities and many opportunities for everyone to be involved on every level, as an activist, as a scientist, as a business person, as an investor. And we're looking into you and the energy and the ideas you will bring into this process. We work a lot with young people. We have innovation challenges that support all of this endeavor. So please connect with us and we can talk more about how we can help and encourage your interest in that space. And when we stop sharing, if I have access to the screen, I'll show you some of these products in the office.
Fantastic. Well, Daniella, thank you so much. And I'd love to see some of those products in the office in the next 20 minutes or so when we're doing Q&A. But I'll just welcome in all our live classes. We've got 5 live groups from across Canada tuning in, which is super exciting. Over 70 people joining in on YouTube, which is amazing. If any of you are live full classes, let me know in the chat bar. I'd love to hear your questions for Daniella. But what we're going to do now is dive in with Q&A. So Miss Cornfield joining us in Waterloo, Ontario with her grade 7 classes. I'm going to turn to you first and come on into the broadcast. If you have a question for us, take us away.
The year's just starting, so my gang's a little bit quiet, but I know that the wheels are turning. We didn't really know what this presentation was going to be about, but some of the innovations are pretty interesting. So what's involved in order for these sort of startups or these innovation companies? Because a lot of that I haven't actually heard of.
Yeah, so we're working on the cutting edge, and this is why you haven't heard about this. Our foundation is in its 10th year, but to develop this kind of innovation takes a lot. So, for example, look at these. These are flip-flops that are one of the really big polluting items in Indonesia and the Philippines. They're made of rubber, they break down, they end up in the ocean. These, however, are made out of algae. So to develop algae as a source of this material takes substantial academic investment and investment in research and development. So these are a product of UC San Diego. We work a lot with academic labs. We work with innovators around the world, and we work with the foundations that and other investors who will help us support their work through grants and early stage of research. So we work with research labs around the world. There is a whole green chemistry movement that is developing these alternatives to fossil fuel-based plastics. So the process begins as early as high school or probably even middle school, because everywhere where chemistry is taught, everywhere where biology is taught, there is an opportunity to teach material science and to teach social applications of this scientific process.
Fantastic. All right, let's go to Ms. Wheeler's class. So they're joining us live in Kitchener, Ontario. If you guys have a question for us, I'll bring you into the broadcast and go from there. Ms. Panjashin, you can start typing questions in the chat bar, and we'll come to Ms. Gerard and Ms. Jones's class in a minute. Ms. Wheeler, come on in and take us away. Just demute your mic and good to go. Should be just a microphone symbol bottom of your screen, and then you'll be able to share with us. No, still muted. No, you're still muted, Ms. Wheeler. Sorry. You'll need to unmute your mic. And I can't. There we go. Perfect.
Can you hear me now?
Yep. No, you're still muted, Ms. Wheeler. Sorry. Oh, you'll need to unmute your mic.
Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
No, you're muted, Ms. Wheeler.
Okay, hi. I'm working with my class virtually, so we're just trying to generate some questions online.
Yeah.
And just looking at my chat here.
Hi, I'm working with my class virtually.
And one student has a question, and they said, first of all, how are the cups and straws made edible? Is a question. Maybe you could speak to that. I think it's already been answered.
I wanted to show you something. So this is a set of cups that are made to be edible. They're made edible because they use algae or seaweed that is processed in a way that makes it harder, and therefore it can take the shape of a cup or a straw. But primarily what makes it edible is the source material. So if you use sugarcane, if you use algae or seaweed, these are all materials that can be made edible. So that's how this works. And also during the process, no chemicals, no toxic chemicals are being used. Other materials that are not edible but are not toxic are made out of agricultural waste. So for example, one of the big problems that we're looking to solve, and I'm looking at all of your generation to solve it, is something called multi-layer packaging. Multi-layer packaging is when you get a bag of chips or when you get a candy, you know, that shiny packaging, that shiny plastic cover is actually 3 layers of material. And it's used to keep everything crunchy inside or dry or to preserve its freshness. It's very important. It's also completely not recyclable. And industry has made it not recyclable. Plastic film, anything that is kind of the soft plastic, is not recyclable and extremely polluting. So we're working with our entrepreneurs worldwide to find an alternative to that material that has all the properties of food packaging. Yeah. And so the research organization that we work with out of Finland has created this prototype. This is a little prototype of a packaging that can be used for snacks, for Cheerios. It preserves, this one has M&Ms inside, so it preserves the quality of the material or the food inside, but it's made out of agricultural waste. As you know, Finland has a lot of woodsy areas, and wood is a big part of their industry. So we're looking for solutions to this particular problem. It's a very challenging one, and where that is how we're trying to achieve it by creating the same properties that this material would have if it was plastic, but recreating it from another source.
Nice. All right, so we got some questions from Miss Pancherson's class in Edmonton, Alberta. So welcome in. Nice to have an Edmonton group in. So Charlotte had the first question. Are there any species that have gone extinct from plastic pollution that you can think of, Danielle?
It's hard to tell because we're still finding the extent to which plastic pollution affects life on life below water and life on the surface of the planet. We do know that every fish and every marine life species that has been examined has components of plastic in its stomach. That there are many studies now that have told us that. What that really means is when these animals ingest plastic, whether it's small pieces or bigger, they don't die. They carry them in their bellies, but this plastic is not inert. It leaches these chemicals that were used in the making of the container that it came from. So over time, they affect their liver and their lesions that form on their livers. So whether they will be extinct from this is doubt for us to say at this point. We don't know. We haven't seen it for a long enough period, but in all likelihood, they will be affected. Hugely affected also are the albatross birds that made this whole issue very popular with the public. You probably have seen some of them, of an albatross bird with a stomach full of plastic. And so animals that confuse plastic because it's colorful and it looks like plankton or it looks like food and eat it will be affected hugely. I have seen camels in Dubai that carry a calcified piece of plastic in their stomachs up to 70 pounds because they eat it, they're ruminants, and then whatever else they eat around the plastic continues to calcify and they cannot process it. So I've seen the camels who have died from that. Cows in Africa, in India, have died from ingesting plastic. So for a species to go extinct takes a lot, but unfortunately, we're working really hard on this with all the plastic that we put out in the environment.
Fantastic. What a great answer. And to the student's question, too, one of the things that's really interesting about plastic pollution as a topic of research is that it's fairly new. Most of those come in the last 20 years, and most of that has come in the last 5. So this is an exciting time for research. We're learning a lot. We recognize the problem, and there's so many ways that at home you guys can help be part of the solution, which is fantastic. We learned a lot today, which is amazing. So we're going to dive into YouTube with a few quick questions, and then we'll go back through our live classes. Miss Wheeler, thank you for typing yours in. I'm sorry there's a bit of a delay. We'll come back to Miss Cornfield, and Miss Pancherson keeps typing in some awesome questions. So Deborah wants to know, what is the cost to make these bio-benign materials versus traditional materials? Is it cheaper? Is it more expensive? What's the deal?
Deborah, the cost is substantial, and this is why this is not an easy solution. For example, that material that I showed you that is developed as an alternative to the multi-layer packaging that came out of Finland, the initial investment has been almost $10 million. And any material that we create right now to be an alternative to conventional plastic is going to be more expensive than plastic, because plastic is an oil product that has been subsidized by governments around the world for many, many years. In the United States, it enjoys a very generous subsidy. So we can never make anything that is cheaper than plastic. So what we're looking into is not just a new magic material that will automatically replace everything that we do today from plastic, but application-specific changes to the plastic material. So do we really need to package everything in plastic? What can be packaged in another material? What can be packaged in plastic? So industry has to be a willing participant in this. And we work with several major brands. I can tell you that we work with Driscoll, which is one of the biggest agricultural producers of berries and blueberries, strawberries. Driscoll's is very concerned about their plastic footprint, and they're looking for an alternative to both the soil cover and the tenting and the delivery of the product, which is in these plastic clamshells. We're also working with Unilever. Unilever is a brand that represents probably 80% of what's in a grocery store, and they're really interested in us helping them find new materials. They're willing to put the money into it, but the effort to arrive at these materials has to be funded, and it's partially funded with grants by government, grants by philanthropy, and it has to be supported by the right set of policy initiatives that make it a little cheaper to develop this type of innovation. It's expensive.
This is fantastic. We're getting this flood of questions now. We have over 9 classes between live and YouTube tuning in, so it's 200 kids plus. So a huge thank you to all of you guys for being so concerned and fascinated. What we'll do is we'll make sure to highlight ways that you can learn more, because we'll probably not be able to get all the questions in the next 10 minutes, but I'll try my best. So I'm going to go back to Ms. Cornfield. If you have another question for us, I know you do in the chat bar, so share it with us live, and yeah, go from there.
Yeah, hi. So London has a question for you, Daniella. She wants to know how did you get into this profession?
How did I get into this profession? It's been a labor of love. I spent about 20 years of my life in Silicon Valley, and as an entrepreneur, I helped start some of the first internet companies for search and retrieval, and every time you use your browser, you use the technology that my company introduced. I got into this because I'm a problem solver. And when I learned about plastics, it was about 10 years ago or so, I was shocked by how big of a problem this is and how little we know about this and how little we're doing to change that narrative and to change the use of this material. It became a challenge, and then it became a lifelong ambition for me to help make that change. But I have to tell you, what excites me right now more than anything is the attention young people are paying to this and the desire to create that change. Because in the beginning, it was working uphill. It was trying to convince everyone that plastics are bad. Now, the reality is that we're looking into building a society that uses plastics smartly in the way they were intended, to last forever, not to throw away. And to me personally, that's a challenge, that's an opportunity. It's what excites me. And what excites me, as I said, the most is getting the word out and getting a massive wave of innovation working on this.
Outstanding. Thanks, Daniella. I love it. We can highlight career stories. It's always one of my favorite questions we get. So thanks so much to the student in Ms. Cornfield's class. Let's take a few on YouTube, and then we'll wrap up with 2 from Ms. Wheeler and Ms. Pantishin. So Mr. Nichols' class joining us again in the KW area. We got a ton of kids from Kitchener-Waterloo today. So if you've purchased something that's supposed to be biodegradable, is there a way to fact check this? In this case, a telephone case, anything you can think of, how do we find out if it's for real?
Okay, if you remember one thing from what I'm about to say, please remember that. Biodegradable does not mean anything. Anything. There is no definition that says what is biodegradable. Industry likes to call things biodegradable that contain 10% plant matter. The rest of it is conventional plastic. That's not biodegradable. Oxidegradable also does not mean anything. So when somebody tells you this is biodegradable, ask them, what does that mean? How does it degrade? Because there are materials that can degrade under industrial conditions. So if you get some of these cups that the stores sell right now, and they says biodegradable on them, what this really means is that it might biodegrade if it's collected and processed in special industrial conditions. But if you throw this biodegradable cup along with the rest of your plastic waste, that renders the entire recycling stream unusable. Yeah. So biodegradable is it's a label. It means nothing. You need to understand how it is biodegradable, under what conditions, and why it is called biodegradable. It's a big industry debate right now, what we have the right to call biodegradable, Evan.
I'm so glad you got that question. Greenwashing is part of a lot of our plastic, so I'm glad you laid it on us, Daniella. We know the deal now. That's awesome. Let's go to Miss Wheeler's group. So what can we do as consumers to accelerate the movement and get manufacturers to stop creating all these plastic products? Great question from Miss Wheeler's class.
You can do a lot. First of all, as consumers, we're not just some, I hate the word consumers, by the way, I have to tell you, because it implies that you just sit there and you consume what's being thrown at you. We're not consumers, we're active participants in this economy. Nobody is just a consumer, but the extent to which we buy these products makes us responsible for our purchasing choices. Try to avoid single-use and disposable plastics. This sends a message to industry that we don't want products that are packaged this way. Return your packaging if it's given to you and you have no choice. Just put it in the container it came in and send it back if you can. There are many organizations who encourage and facilitate that. The more important thing, and that's my personal belief, is that you need to get involved in a big, more meaningful way, not as a consuming entity, but as an entity that has a voice. Organize, speak to others, reduce your plastic consumption as much as possible, and get involved in the alternatives. These alternatives are not cheap right now. You can get involved as a policymaker. You can get a job as a policymaker and talk about how do we create the right conditions so that this innovation flourishes. You can become an investor, and you can work in impact investment and promote sustainable investments that support this kind of innovation. You can become a chemist or biologist or material scientist or oceanographer. And in every one of these jobs, you can think about what is the plastic impact of your work and what can you do that is different. The easiest thing people will tell you is don't use plastic bags, don't use single-use and disposables. These things are they're important, but they have to be part of your life. Don't feel like you're done when you choose not to use single-use and disposables, or now you use a paper straw instead of plastic and all of that. It has to be much more than that. These are just the obvious things every intelligent human being has to do. The question is, what can you do beyond that? And I encourage all of you to keep following the science on this and figuring out, in whatever way you choose to pursue your future career, how you can support the planet in this really big and important topic.
Well, that would have been a perfect thing to end on. That was an awesome answer. But I want to take one more question from Ms. Panchichin's class. It's a softball one for you. So, and we got it on YouTube as well. What do these straws taste like, these edible straws? And if you don't eat them, can you get rid of them where they can be composted? Do they degrade, without industrial process? Tell us about these edible straws.
All right, so you want an honest answer? I'm not crazy about edible straws. I think I think that straws basically are silly and not needed in general. There's some people for whom, for health reasons, it's important to use a straw. There are people who have difficulties with drinking. But in general, I don't know that we need straws. The edible straws are, to make them taste like something, you have to put chemicals in it, or sugar additives or food additives. So they're made to taste okay. Like I said, I don't know that it's a delicacy, and I don't know that I care about it. But what I like is the paper straws. They're kind of pretty, and they're really one use, and then they degrade. And the same is true with these cups. I think anytime we call something edible, it doesn't mean that necessarily that you have to eat it. What it means is that it's food grade, and it can degrade in the organic compost bin. Yeah. And to me, that's a more important thing than whether it tastes good or not. It's fun for a party, but they're more expensive, and I don't know that I'd recommend them as a snack item in school.
Daniella, laying down the wall today in this session. I love it. Well, I wish we could take all the more questions. Unfortunately, we're out of time for the broadcast. Time flies and you're having fun, people. So what I want to do is bring up again, thinkbeyondplastic.com. You can check it out in the banner at the bottom. Daniella had it in her talk. You can learn more, share more questions there too if you have them. It's been some great commentary on YouTube and live today, so fantastic, everyone. I also want to flag nationalgeographic.com's Planet or Plastic Initiative, which is so big that it doesn't fit quite in one banner on one line, but it's an amazing campaign over the last few years to highlight this issue in a really big way. Do check that out and check out all our past videos on Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants featuring this topic. Daniella, it's been so fun having you today. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye, everyone.
Well, bring in the teachers, Miss Cornfield, Miss Wheeler, Miss Pinchon. If you want to say goodbye with me, go